Welcome to Bards and Barrels, the podcast for Dungeons & Dragons players new and old. I'm Ross Druce, and I'm joined by my friends and co-hosts Brett Miller and Phil Boone. We'll be exploring the world of Dungeons & Dragons in each episode, sharing our experiences, offering tips and advice for those who play and run this classic game. So whether you're a new player just starting out or a seasoned veteran looking to get a new perspective on things, Bards and Barrels has something for everyone. So sit back, grab a drink, and join us as we roll for initiative and embark on an epic adventure. And there's the opening crack. It's time for another episode of Bards and Barrels. Welcome back to the studio, boys.
Hey there.
Hey. How we doing? Phil's back. It's been a hot minute.
It feels kind of sad that I was gone.
It's been like 6 weeks in episode time.
It does feel like that, I'm not going to lie.
So tonight is a mailbag night.
Dun, dun, dun.
I always get a little nervous.
No.
Excited, but
No.
you just never know what's in the bag.
That's true. That's because you guys don't get to see it. I'm the only one that gets to see the bag.
For our
I
friends
know,
that
and
don't.
we're at the will of Ross, which is almost the worst part of all.
I can promise you one thing, no paladin. Ooh, nope, I can't promise that.
Oh, man.
Dang.
Bring in the paladin.
Shoot. But we will kick off tonight with our number one fan, Clint, who has sent in
Don't give
questions
him
before.
that.
I'm going to give him, yeah, he's the number one fan. We'll give him that. Clint writes in and asks, how would you handle a player who wants to create custom attacks? I understand this could possibly break the game. I'm assuming it's something that would have to be run by the DM, but I think this could add some fun and variety to D&D, which tends to have standard attack moves list as other games in that genre. Any ideas would be appreciated. Thanks. Appreciate the question, Clint. Now we will do our best to give you a satisfying answer.
Quote unquote super fan.
Don't listen to him, Clint. It's fine.
Oh, man. Yes is my ultimate answer. I think that you can. I'm trying to think of, best route to kind of do that, or even on the DM side, if a player approached me and wanted to do that, what I might suggest or be open to. Honestly, I think you could re-flavor something, take an existing attack and modify it to fit either the style of character that you're creating, or maybe you want to change damage type or something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to be, huge and game breaking. If you want to create something totally brand new, I say go for it, right? I would love to see what it's going to be, and then we can figure out mechanically how it fits, right?
Sure.
If you have this awesome idea, let's make it happen, even if we have to maybe knock it down a dice, or, make the damage type just slashing or something that's not going to hold up against magic. I think that's awesome.
Well, and you can have things scale over time. So if you can set up an attack so that after level 5, you start to get an extra damage dice, or maybe you don't get that ability, that type of attack until you reach level 10 or something like that. Your character is much different at those higher levels, and so maybe you can get into some of the more custom waylaying on people, custom attacks later on.
Sure, and it's not really unprecedented in the world of D&D. If you go through and look at a lot of monsters, especially the prime big bad evil guy type monsters in the modules, they have attacks that are unique to them. They're not necessarily, it's not the DM coming up with those, but they're unique attacks that aren't found that a player can use, right? So it's there are things like that that exist out there.
Yeah, it's with some of the big baddies could have a legendary action.
Right.
And those are you can only use those once every X number of rounds, and you have to roll a dice to get it to reset. That's a great way to limit an overpowered ability if you or the DM is finding that that's a little too strong for where you're at right now.
That's actually, so as we're kind of gearing up to re-kick off our larger campaign, we've kind of modified the setting. We're doing some different homebrew things with it. One of the things that I wanted to do for the characters is, as they kind of have this individual arc before the party comes back together, you're going to have some interactions, and each of you are going to gain something. Similar situation. I wanted it to be something that wasn't just routine, right? So I kind of found some things that I liked, took pieces from here and there, looked at other examples of okay, if this played out, is this too powerful? How does it compare against something similar? Even if it's These are more like abilities instead of attacks, but same
Sure.
thing.
Well, and so now that you mentioned that, it made me think. So we've done a little bit of that already. So it's like Thorn having the amulet that granted some healing abilities. Again, not an attack, but it's something we just came up with kind of on the fly. So that's a good example of that. The scales that he had on his arm, which weren't an attack or it was more of like a weird version of a perception check in some ways.
Right.
So also something that we kind of just came up with and did on the fly. So I think there's lots of breadth to what you could possibly do. Also, if you came to me and said like you wanted to have a version of Fury of Blows that a monk does or something like that, it's like you can take one piece out of one class, one piece out of another class, that the mechanics exist, and we can mishmash those together and come up with something. So I think all of that is doable.
There's also so much out there for other homebrew content that is
Yes.
available that you can piggyback off of and tweak and create to fit your character, that you could kind of go any way you want to go.
Have you ever browsed through the homebrew magic items on Beyond?
No.
Do yourself a favor and search for the Holy Hand Grenade,
Oh, nice.
because you better believe it's out there.
That's awesome.
Full quote and everything in the description.
Nice.
It's fantastic.
Nice. Okay, well, so long story short, Clint, I think, yes, absolutely you can do that. If you are ever at our table, we would come up with a way to make whatever you want work for your character. So hopefully that was a satisfying answer. And
Thanks, Clint.
Yeah, thank you, Clint.
Thanks, Clint.
We're going to move on to the next question. This one comes from friend of the show, Sean, a.k.a. Crit Hit the Giant.
Hey.
He is looking into creating a homebrew in Faerun and was wondering what to use as a resource so that he can learn about Sword Coast, Faerun, that area, so he can plan out his homebrew story. So, thoughts on that, boys?
Well, Phil is digging into
As
his
he
box of
Pulls
toys.
out his book.
I came prepared.
I have it right here.
Anytime we have mailbag, you guys, I have to bring some books just in case. So, one of my favorite things for that is the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and this is put out by Wizards of the Coast. It's a Dungeons and Dragons book. One of the reasons it is my absolute favorite is at the very beginning in the preface, it has a map of the Sword Coast, and it's one of the best maps, at least in 5th edition, that I've found. So it also has information on kind of each of the areas, some of the people that are in the areas, information about like the different factions. So if you're trying to build something in Faerun, I find that one's really helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of the background information that you can maybe get a little bit of information from some of like the player's handbook or DM's guide, but that really goes into a lot more detail.
And some of the campaign books even have specifics. Like I'm thinking of the Descent into Avernus book. There's a section in there, it's called the Baldur's Gate Gazetteer, and it just has information about Baldur's Gate, very specific, like different sects in the city, like just that kind of information. So those are obviously kind of piecemeal. You have to hunt for those pieces, but that information's out there.
I found that the Sword Coast Adventures Guide had way more information than I could ever hope to want. Like, I mean, it gets into like governments, types of governments, not only like overarching, but in each of the cities, and then like the class system in the cities, and it's like all things you need to know if you want to interact in there, but also all things you could completely ignore and kind of do your own thing with if you really wanted to.
If you happen to get a hold of the Storm King's Thunder campaign book too, it's got information about a bunch of different areas across Faerun as well, because part of that is sort of traveling across the Sword Coast. So it's got some good details on different small little cities too.
Okay, so while we're answering something from Crit Hit, I actually saw one of his Instagram reels that he posted today, and one of the writers, I think it was, from some of the D&D modules, said that if he could go back and redo the player's manual, or the player's handbook, sorry, and take out, he wished he would have less classes for people to choose from, which got me to thinking. And this is kind of a fun question. This is not one that was sent in, but Crit Hit made me do this. Stop. Which one of the classes would you take out if you had to eliminate something out of there?
Ooh.
I think that's a really hard question to approach.
I think if you were going to take one out completely, you would have to take some of that class's features and migrate them. Because I'm thinking like I lean towards maybe a sorcerer. If you migrate some of those abilities either to your wizard or to your warlock somehow. You should still have some way of having like a wild magic type of user.
Sure.
Which almost maybe is a warlock key, like almost a chaos sort of energy.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that one. I feel like you could maybe collapse it into the others.
I think you make a good point, because those are like, if you're looking at all the classes that are available to you, those are the three that are like the closest to each other. Are warlock, sorcerer, wizard, all heavy magic. And it's really the flavor for each that distinguishes each of them and how they got their magic and how they use it.
I think there's a use case maybe between, and I don't know where you would draw the line, right? But I'm thinking of like, okay, paladin, cleric, both kind of holy, but paladin more fighter. So, could you take a fighter and make them a holy warrior? So you would just have almost like a subclass of fighter, and you have clerics and you have fighters. But to that same point, like, what about a monk?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I would also say between barbarian and fighter, those two are
very similar.
Yep.
Yeah.
kind of the same class. I mean, a fighter can do more ranged, but outside of that,
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Do you just have like 6 different types of fighters, right?
yeah.
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
which would be your ranger, your rogue, your paladin, your barbarian.
Right. All is like subclasses of it.
Yeah.
You could. Yeah.
It's like you've got to have like a fighter, a healer, a utility, and a spellcaster.
Yeah.
Like, so you could really boil it down to 4 classes if you really wanted to.
What I'm hearing though is that we're not getting rid of the bard,
Nope. He stays.
and I'm not sure why. But
I don't know.
It's so different than anything else.
I agree.
I've got nothing to
I
follow
know.
that, but you're just right.
It's just out there, like,
But you gotta have it. I mean, I feel
true.
like it's gotta be there.
for the right type of person that wants to play bard.
Yeah, I never
Sure.
play them.
That's
but
not me.
one shot.
Okay,
All
so
the bands.
I just thought that would be an interesting little conversation to have, and Sean's reel, actually, I think he reposted that. Actually, made me think of that, so I thought that was worth bringing up. But thank you, Sean. Keep sending in those questions. We're always willing to answer. Hey, and Koopa the Dungeon Dog sounding in from the bed over there. Our next, this one's more of a discussion topic. One of the shorts that we released on YouTube a while back, it was Phil and I doing a little bit on D&D economics, on how the rogue lifted some money and he only got 10 coins, and he was complaining because it was only 10 coins. But then the DM's like, well, what do you think these people are made of? Do you think they're made of money because it's worth X amount, which is like, I don't know, $100 a gold coin or whatever is what we said. But we had somebody on YouTube reach out to us with how they handle those types of things. And I thought it was worth reading his comment and then discussing that a little bit. So shout out to Jacob Bissy 9311 on YouTube. And he replied to this short by saying, personally, I just factor it into the roll, especially if they have proficiency or expertise. If they roll well, they just take the most they can safely get away with. But if they roll low, they misjudge how far they can safely go and overextend. Alternately, if they are just wanting to get money and not mess with someone in particular, I tell them they will get more if they don't go after one individual and instead skim around the room for multiple sources in the crowd and have them roll once against the crowd. That way they can get more appealing amount of money without having to deal with the realism of getting it all from one player, which I thought this was really interesting because you don't really think about that mechanic. You just like, I'm stealing from this guy, go. And that's how you kind of view it in game.
Phil, as our resident rogue
Our rogue in residence.
Hold on, I'm brooding.
Legit is brooding.
he's like stroking the chin, like,
I just realizing that in our Strahd campaign, I would have got a lot more money if I wouldn't have tried to pickpocket Strahd, and I would have tried to pickpocket
That's
the
true.
crowd.
You picked
Anybody
the one
else?
guy and picked
I
incorrectly.
I picked the one guy and probably almost died. I love that take on it, and I feel like as a DM that I should change how I ask for, those types of roles. Although, let's be honest, if I'm not playing the rogue, usually no one is. So,
Accurate.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably, I like that idea. I don't know. What do you think, Brett?
it's an interesting idea. I wonder if it can get to be a little bit like you can game the system a little bit too much by doing it that way. Like if you were to do that every single time, does it get stale over time? I don't know.
but I feel like if he's thinking about it in this way, he knows like if the rogue goes too far or does too much in a single room, that the challenge rating for that roll is going to get higher the more you do it potentially too. So it's like one roll meant you picked 3 or 4 people's pockets, but then if you want to go back and do it again, odds are going to be a little bit against you this time. You got to roll higher in order to achieve the same result.
Yeah.
So I think you could throttle that a little bit in a way that makes it at least harder so you don't run into that issue.
How greedy of a rogue are you?
Exactly. I think that's what it would boil down to. Yeah. So anyway, I thought this was a good question. This also kind of leads into how great the D&D community is, because this is something that we do a lot of, but had never really thought of in this way. So I thought that was really cool and worth discussing. So thank you for the comment, Jacob. And now we're going to move on to a different question, of course. This one's more of a technical question. Yes, thank you. This one's more of a technical question.
What about a sidebar?
You want a sidebar? Let's do a sidebar.
Because Jacob's his comment has me thinking about something else I read this week about magic item shops. If we're talking about economics, expense, whatever, a lot of times when we walk into a magic shop, we have them like roll to, persuade or bring down prices of things. But the comment I read this week was, how often do you have a magic item shop? Magic items are supposed to be rare.
Sure.
In Dungeons and Dragons.
That's a very good point.
But how often do we just roll into town?
And they just magically, no pun intended, have what you're looking for.
Right.
So there was actually a question that I didn't throw in tonight's mailbag that was very similar to that I came across. They were talking about health potions. Like potions of greater healing or something like that are supposed to be fairly rare. So it's like, if you have the gold and it's in the list for a shop in the back of the book, you're just going to say, well, they have these. You just have to pay X amount of money. But reality is, like magic items, not every shop should have these. Matter of fact, almost every shop should not have these things. But we don't really play it that way either. You're right.
But you do end up balancing a little bit with the shop is only going to have maybe 1 or 2.
That's true.
Of those nicer items. And that's fairly realistic because they'll have some of the nicer stuff in the back.
Right.
But not a lot of it.
That's a fair point. And I think you have played. You are very generous with me.
This is why we have unbalanced combat. This is all my fault, and I know that. But definitely got me thinking, like, yep, time to start restricting inventory.
Yeah, it's the balance between fun and realism.
Yeah, right. And you tiptoe that pretty well, though, for the most part. So
tiptoes right down the fun line.
Right.
It's more like a jig.
Right, a jig. Yes. Okay. Technical question. 1 round of combat is 6 seconds. In my last session, the cleric casted Spiritual Weapon, and its duration is 1 minute. We have 7 participants in combat, so if each person is 6 seconds, then would it only be good for 1 attack?
No.
I thought, so the 6 seconds, you're 7 people, but those 7 people play those 6 seconds basically at the same time, if that would make sense. So you would 10 turns.
Yes.
That person would get 10 turns and still have Spiritual Weapon in play.
I recommend watching Vox Machina on YouTube or on Amazon and watching how they have battles. And they'll jump between everybody in one quick round, and then they'll cycle through everybody and then go back through everybody again, basically imitating what is happening when we're playing around a table. Everybody goes simultaneously, 6 seconds total, and then it resets and everybody starts through again.
Yeah, it's a very good visual example of things happening concurrently. Like everybody essentially is taking their turn at the same time. You just have to play it you have to play it separate. That way you can play out whatever you're doing to its fullest extent. So.
It is harder to picture as you're sitting around the table or sitting through, Roll20 or whatever it is that you choose to play, because you take turns in sequential order, right? Yeah. So it's harder to imagine that all happening at the same time. So
sure. It's like if somebody gets pushed in a battle, does that happen? How does that affect everybody else?
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like each person is taking one of those 6 seconds in the round.
That's how it feels. Yeah.
Sure.
Always.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And that makes
one of the 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
With 7 people is like a little bit less than 1.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think we had a very similar question to that in the last mailbag, but I thought it was worth bringing that back up because it seems to be a recurring question that it's confusing for people that's kind of how it works. But I love your Vox Machina answer. I think that might have been how you answered the last one, but that is exactly how you view that, or you should view that.
It's boom, 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 boom.
Exactly. This next question is about the shield spell. It says a player can use it as a reaction when the attack roll hits. So does he add the +5 to the AC on that hit? And if the AC is greater, it misses? Or does he take that hit's damage and then it's for the next hit?
I guess have always ruled that it's that turn. So if it hits you, and then you use your shield as a reaction, you bump your AC +5 for that turn. But
Correct.
that's how I've always ruled it.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a reaction. So you pop it up as it's coming towards you, like, oh no, pop the shield.
Okay, so the verbiage on the rule itself says an invisible barrier, English, of magical force appears and protects you. Until the start of your next turn, you have a +5 bonus to AC, including against the triggering attack. So it's kind of like if you read through that really fast, you would think, oh, it's on the next turn, but it's until your next turn. And then the keyword in there is the triggering attack is what it's actually defending against.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's like if you're trying to figure that out while you're in combat, I can see where you'd be like, oh crap, that's not for this turn, it's for the next turn. But reality is it's that one.
It seems like including against the triggering attack needs to be at the beginning.
Yes, that would be very helpful. You're absolutely right. Next question, and I'm sorry, this is a paladin question.
Ah, there it
But
is.
it's paladin,
Everybody
but
drink.
but it's not really a paladin, so you got to finish your beer.
We had a rogue question, so I'm fine with it.
This is just a fun one. Flying mount for an evil paladin. Can't be a dragon or something undead. What would it be?
A Thestral. Oh, wait.
I mean, it could be if those existed. At least it existed.
Is that undead?
You could. I mean, they're not undead, but they're like death surrounds them.
Why are we saying that Thestrals don't exist when unicorns and
Well, that's fair.
fae and devils,
That's true.
demons, we're good with those, but not.
Different nerddom.
I was thinking like a griffin or something like. But if I feel like if you're an evil paladin, your mount needs to be somewhat evil too.
Is a nightmare undead?
A giant undead vulture.
Can't be undead though.
Nightmares are not undead. I'm checking. They are fiends.
Oh, that would be cool for an evil
You don't have to have
paladin.
be
A
undead
flaming
vulture.
horse.
It's just a vulture, a giant vulture.
A giant vulture.
That
Sure.
would be pretty sweet.
Like, take that, Gandalf.
Me riding my vulture, you on your eagle.
Yeah.
Like this epic rap battle about to go down. Gandalf and the evil paladin, yo.
Like maybe a Narzugon.
Yeah,
Rode
sure.
a nightmare.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. I think a Nightbear would be pretty cool for an evil paladin.
Velociraptor.
Yes, why not? They exist. We know they
They
exist.
do. They are actually in the book, not Thestrals, but
Weird. Okay, next one. I'm a novice DM. The players are 5th level in my campaign. I have major plot lines running in the background, which the players just figured out one, and they're about to figure out another, and discover a big bad evil guy this session. This morning, I got a text for one of my players that highlighted a couple of issues he has with my game style, and I know that not every table is meant for every player, but he brought up a really good point. My players have not been feeling like heroes enough. The storylines have been a slow burn, moving forward each session. I've been trying to make the world feel alive by making them feel a part of it, but in doing so, I have made at least this player feel like just another person in this world instead of the hero. So my question is, with slow-burning storylines, how do you give your players more chances to feel like a hero without giving them basically plot armor and letting them know that there are bigger threads out there that they're not ready for?
Side quests.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I applaud this DM. Like, good on you
I agree.
for setting that stuff, and good on the player for bringing that up, because that's good communication around the table. I think the player needs to take a little bit of a chill pill. You're level 5. Like, you're
Right.
not really a hero yet.
I think that's like listed somewhere, right? You're not heroes until you're level 10,
Something like that,
basically,
yeah.
or something like,
Like-
that. You're like local celebrities, but
Yeah,
you're not real
sure.
heroes yet.
I feel like he doesn't say this, but my guess is this is probably a homebrew because I feel like all the modules that we've run have advanced you quickly enough that you do feel like you're making an impact in the story. But I understand where this could be problematic though, because if you're in a homebrew and you don't really know where you're going, how do you feel like you're advancing anything? And so it's like you still have to lay groundwork fairly early, and maybe this is a case of like you need to make some of these threads slightly more obvious. Like there's a very specific path you need to go. You don't have to follow it right now, but this is what's going to lead you on without railroading you, kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know.
I like Brett's idea of side quests too. I think even if you can give them some like wins in social interactions, so it may not necessarily have to be combat, but maybe they, I don't know, whether it's a debate or a negotiation or something, like give them some wins. Or, I mean, shoot, if they're in the town, like throw in some carnival games or something like that they can conquer, that they can do. Maybe there are evil carnies, right? Something easy that gives them some wins.
Sure. Or feed them a minion.
Yeah.
Like have one of the underlings of the big baddie come in and take them on at this level, setting up the storyline down the road for the bigger, badder, the boss.
Right. I think to a certain extent, as players, though, you need, this is not a module that's pushing you forward, you have to be willing to go find these things too. Because, like, if you're just an everyday person in the tavern, there's really no reason for the constable to come up to you and say, hey, somebody just robbed the bank. Like, maybe instead you see a wanted poster that somebody's wanted and you and your group want to go after them, right? But you still have to make the initiative to say, we see that, ask for things in the world, and then actually go do it too. So it's like, yes, the DM could make things slightly easier, but the players need to take a little initiative too to like try to seek out those things.
Yeah.
And that goes back to where this is a joint storytelling adventure.
Correct.
Like
yes.
you guys are doing this together. Listen to each other, give feedback to each other, to players and to the DM, and work through this. Like
for sure.
Yeah, and even if it's not your style, right? Maybe you have to give them something a little earlier on.
Sure.
You know, as a cooperation between the two of you, and then a little more slow burn, and then give them another win, right?
Right.
I mean, it is just that it's a team effort.
Right. For sure. Okay, moving on to this next one. A rule I've never understood is the disadvantage on attack rolls using ranged weapons within 5 feet. Could a fellow DM that might understand why this rule is explain it? I don't know. I feel like it'd be easier to hit a target up close rather than far away.
I agree. I don't like that rule.
I don't enforce this rule.
I get it though, because it's like if you have a melee weapon, you're here, right? You can stab, you can swing close range, but with a bow, you have to take the time to do this.
It's timing.
Draw.
I agree.
And
you have
that opponent can also bump your arrow or hit the bow.
Correct. So I feel like that's why the disadvantage exists, particularly in bows.
I think it ties back to our question earlier about timing. Like technically those things are happening at the same time. So
Sure.
as you go to draw the string on your bow, like they could cut the bow right out of your hands in that exact same time. Like that happens at the same time.
Right.
I think that's the reason for it.
And Legolas. Like he's jumping on top of people, shooting them square in the head. Like
Sure. Well, and
he's not taking disadvantage.
I think you could make
Fair.
an exception where if you have proficiency with a bow at a certain level, that disadvantage would just go away because of that reason. He would obviously be proficient with a bow. So that would be a good example of that. But like if anybody that's ever fired a bow before, even on a modern compound type bow, when you pull it, like at a distance, you can make very minor adjustments and still hit the target. But at close range, that becomes like this, which is a lot harder to adjust for. So, and you think of somebody trying to swing and attack you and cut it out of your hands, makes it even harder to do. So I get it, but I think it's there for a reason though too. It's up to you if you want to enforce it. So
yeah, it's just a balancing mechanism.
Sure. Next question: in major combats, do you always try to kill your players?
What kind of question is that? No, not purposefully.
But also, yes.
Well, I'm trying to think of that. So the goal is never to kill the players, but if the monster's intention is to decimate them, then yeah, like monster's gonna do what monster's gonna do. But
Right.
I don't seek out to kill my players.
It depends on who you are role playing as the DM. Like if it's a very evil person the big bad boss, yeah, probably.
Mhm.
Some of the minions, or like in the book, the monsters know what they're doing. It talks about goblins and how goblins want to shoot and then get out of there.
Right.
Like, goblins aren't going to try and kill your whole party necessarily. Like, they're going to run and hide.
Right.
Yeah, whereas like some fiends, right? They're just looking to add souls, so they'll
Mhm.
reap whatever they can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. In that book, The Monsters Know What They're Doing is a great resource for that, because you just have to kind of put your shoes into whoever you're playing in that moment. If you're just a pickpocket on the street who got caught trying to pickpocket your paladin's coin purse or something like that, and your paladin takes offense to that, that pickpocket probably really doesn't want to die today. So he might take a swing, but then he's going to boogie out. Whereas, to your credit, Brett, if you're fighting Strahd, he wants you dead. He is going to play to kill you. Now, he may do that in a strategic manner, play the long game of that.
Phil, are you taking
I'm
notes on
taking
this?
notes. This is good to know.
Stop. He always wants to kill you. What are you talking about?
You let me live once.
So far. You're still in prison. We got to work that out.
What? Oh, once again, Phil was gone. Now he's in prison.
True. That is a good point. This next one's going to be very familiar to us. This is a question about Zerial. And it says, my players are going to be fighting Zerial in the next session. They are 5, Bard, Cleric, Warlock, Sorcerer, Rogue, and they're all level 18, which I found very interesting because that is a very high level in that game. If you're running Avernus, they could be playing this somewhere else, I guess.
That must be somewhere else.
They have Bell at their side, so this makes me think that they are playing Descent into Avernus because they went and talked to Bell at some point. My Warlock out of game and in game is scared shitless about a TPK, and I feel justified for throwing this kind of a counter at them. Since they are 5 level 18 characters, am I overestimating or underestimating anything? I plan on giving Zerial her flying airship, but him freaking out has me second guessing. I would just like second opinions, really. Wow.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
I don't even know. Like, there's so many ways that can go, but it sounds like they're gearing up for combat, not for a negotiation, which is very different than how our campaign went, right?
Yes.
So realistically, if they're following along in the book, they're like 5 levels ahead of where you guys were at. So I would think that they, especially with Bell at their side, I think it would be fair.
Now, remind me, I feel like Bell, when we talked to him, wanted to help us, or at least help us in quotation marks, but really didn't want to be involved directly at all. So this is venturing off the path of the actual storyline in the book, right?
If they're playing that campaign, yes,
Sure.
But they may not be. They
Sure,
may just
that's a
be,
good point.
and that's fine. But it will be a challenge. But I think that a party, was it 6 people plus
5.
Bell? 5
5
plus
Bell, yeah, so 6.
Paladin and a cleric, both.
No, Bard, Cleric, Warlock, Sorcerer, Rogue.
No Paladin, but cleric. I mean, it would be a challenge for sure, but I think they could do it, and I think it's okay to throw it at an 18 level party.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think if you're worried about it being too easy, I mean, she has an entire army that's close by. If you're playing it where it happens in Descent, there's a whole battle going on within arm's reach of this. So if it's getting close and you feel like it's being too easy, you could reroute a few baddies to come.
Make them
Come help.
sweat.
And
Make those players
absolutely.
sweat.
I agree.
Yes.
And on the flip side, right, if it's getting too hard, have Bell intercede.
Sure. Yeah.
Same thing, right? Like he realizes you're overwhelmed and calls in reinforcements or
Right.
whatever. Planer shifts the whole party out of there to regroup. You've got options, so don't be afraid to put them in there.
I agree. I mean,
I think
if
it'd be
you're- if you-
fun.
If you're 18th level and you're taking on Zerial, be ready for anything.
Yep.
Just start swinging. I do find it interesting that if it is Descent, that they're going into this just saying, we're going to take her out and not negotiate at all.
Maybe they tried that.
Man,
That's possible.
please write us back in and
Yeah,
let us
and let
know
us
how
know.
this goes.
Or I'm pretty sure if Lulu doesn't go with you, you have 0 chance of success potentially.
Oh, because
So it
that's the
could
only
be
thing that could turn her. Yeah. Shoot. Well, that's
Or it lowers your chance. It's not 0%.
sure. Okay, our last question of the night is this is a pretty simple one. What can you do other than attack on your action?
Dodge, dash, dip, dive. No, wait. Oh, sorry.
All those things. Yes.
I think you can interact with an object, I believe is one of the actions.
Mhm.
You can try to disengage. You can dash.
You can use your shield, improvise, grapple, hide,
Oh, hide. Yeah,
Hide,
hide's
sure.
a good one.
Yeah.
shove, escape, search, help, ready in action,
Help.
Ready in action. That's a tricky one.
dash, use an object, or use some sort of class feature. Like there's lots of different things you can do on your turn.
Sure.
Well, I think it's unique too, right? So there are going to be a set of actions that are normal, but to Brett's point about whether it's a racial feat or a class feat or something like that, look at your character sheet and see what you have listed for those actions. Like I'm thinking of a bonus action, like Second Wind, I believe is a bonus action, but there are things like that you gain in your different classes that some of them are a full action on your turn.
Sure. Okay, boys. Any final thoughts on any of the questions we had before we?
Good
before we get out of
questions.
here?
Keep them coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody that submitted one this week. That's going to do it for this episode of Bards and Barrels. You can listen to past episodes of the show anywhere podcasts can be found. You want to stay in the loop and not miss the latest from us, be sure to head over and give us a like and a follow on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube Music at Bards and Barrels. We'll see you soon.